Hello and welcome to this week's edition of The Life of a Cold Mountain Character. This week we will be interviewing Miss Ada Monroe. As most of you know, Miss Monroe was the lady that the main character of the book, Inman, was coming back to upon his return from the Civil War. Although Inman is facing his own struggles and journey throughout the book, all the while Miss Monroe is facing her own struggles. She had to learn to run and manage a farm all on her own. This was a way of learning survival skills to get through the times until Inman would return home from the war. Here is Miss Monroe now. Welcome, Miss Monroe. We would like to thank you for giving us some of your time away from the farm today to talk to us. We know that you must be busy tending to all those animals on the farm, and we are privileged to have you today. So let's get started. First off, Miss Monroe, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, first off, let me start by saying thank you guys for giving me the honor to be featured in this week's interview. I feel so privileged to share with you all a little bit about me. As you all know, I'm Ada Monroe, and I come from the Charleston area. However, I moved to the hills of North Carolina with my father, who was an educated preacher. We were very much used to the sophisticated Charleston society, and it was a culture shock moving down here to the hills and countrysides of North Carolina. However, we quickly fell in love with the countryside. It just takes a while, especially for me, to adjust. Most people would consider me a very smart and sophisticated young woman compared to those around these hills of North Carolina. I most definitely stood out like a sore thumb when it came to public events, because I was always found in a sophisticated outfit completed with my heels. When we first started here in North Carolina, I stood out like a sore thumb. But now that I have gotten used to our neighbors, we all get along. I don't feel so outcasted.
What was the hardest part about Inman leaving for the war?
The hardest part about Inman leaving was me having to stay and tend to the farm all by myself. I was lucky enough to have wonderful neighbors who were willing to help me out and teach me some things. I really struggled though, taking on the everyday duties of the farm by myself, and in a way, I looked at it as facing my own internal war, all while Inman was away fighting his own war. Or our country's own war. As the struggle of my farming and cooking days were very well expressed in the book by saying, cookery had become a pressing issue for Ada. She was perpetually hungry, having eaten little through the summer, but milk, fried eggs, salads, and plates of miniature tomatoes from the untended plants that had grown wild and bushy with suckers, and might I just say, my gardening skills were not that great. Cooking and farming were in need of survival for me at this time, because without taking care of these animals and all these crops and stuff on the farm, I would not have the resources available to me to survive, or I would have been able to cook. I also faced the struggle of my father's recent death once we moved from here to North Carolina. With this, I had to learn not to rely on my father and to do things on my own, which was a struggle. During the war, I also found out that my father's investments had dried up because of the war, so I had the struggle of dealing with the hardships of that, and I had to learn to live a little bit more resourceful.
I can see that this has really changed you and made you a better person because of the struggle, Miss Ada. But how did you get through this struggle? Because you made it look so easy.
Well, all the things that made it all easy for me was this one wonderful lady named Ruby. Ruby was a farm girl through and through. And she was native to these hills of North Carolina, so she knew everybody. And it showed, as expressed in the book. After Ada made her decision known, Ruby wasted no time. She knew who had excess animals and produce, who would be willing to trade favorably, and in this case, it was Old Jones up on the East Fork she dealt with. She jumped right into my farm, and she showed me everything that I needed to know. She was a true blessing in this time of need for me, and I had no clue what I was doing, but she knew it all. She knew how to cook, clean, and tend to all the animals and crops. She showed me everything, and I owe a lot to her to get me through these times of need. She also supported me in every decision I made and made the hard ones so much easier for me. She is such a hard worker, and I admire her so much. She's such a great person.
What decisions did she support?
Well, Ruby really supported my decision when I was contemplating going back to Charleston after Inman left and my father passed away. However, I decided that I did not need to go back to Charleston. She supported me through that whole situation of me deciding that I had no family and no ties left in Charleston. As it stated in the book, even now, return to Charleston was a bittersweet thought and one that her pride, my pride, rejected. There was nothing pulling her back there, certainly not family. I had to cope with the fact that I had no family left except for an aunt that lived in Charleston, and we were not that close. That was even remotely close, and I had to now call North Carolina my home. But that was okay, and Ruby, she was really great.
How would you say yours and Edmund's relationship is?
Well, since he had gone off to the war, it was a struggle. I tried to write him when I could, but other than that, we often did not have much of a normal relationship, as most people around these hills would call it. When I found out that he was coming home, that's when I began to feel the love for him. It wasn't until I saw him turn around that cold mountain that I knew he was the one. That is, after I finally recognized him. We planned our life of love together and planned to live happily ever after. But unfortunately, as most of y'all know, he was shot by the Home Guards and died tragically.
What is your relationship with Ruby?
Well, I have told you so many times, she is amazing. And of course, she taught me how to cook, live off the land, bargain, and pretty much survive. And I owe a lot of it to her. And as you know, I returned the favor by using some of my specialty skills to help her. In the book, as you know, I began by reading aloud to her The Odyssey. We also share many childhood stories, which has become a large part of our relationship.
How are you now?
Well, if you read the epilogue of the book, it kind of says it all. As you know, Edmund tragically passed away, so we're slowly trying to cope with that, even though it's been, over 10 years years ago. Ruby is now living with us on the farm, and she is still my best friend. I love that woman. By us, I mean my daughter, who is just a blessing to me. And as many of you know, she is Edmund's and mine, so I have her to cherish and to share. And I can see so many memories that I've had with Edmund in her, and I cherish those for the rest of my life. I think this has become a great life for me.
One last question before you go, Miss Ada. What was the true purpose of this book?
Well, the book was to show tragedy in many different perspectives and many different ways. As you saw, the tragedy of my father passing away, me having to survive, and also having to deal with the death of Edmund. And also, it creates an irony among different factors in the book, also relating back to the Odyssey that I read Miss Ruby later on. It was also a story about transformation, and I think you can figure out why it's a book about transformation. I think y'all would all agree.
Well, Miss Ada, it was a pleasure talking to you today, but that is all the time we have for today. We want to thank you for coming and spending your time with us on your busy days. Tune in next week for our show where we will be interviewing Miss Ruby.